hand. Fourth, when asking via the Q&A or chat options, don't self-promote unless asked to. Webinars are more fast-paced than regular lectures or talks. Therefore, introductions and self-promotion should be kept to a minimum while asking yourself if your comment or question would be helpful to others. Thank you very much, and please advise that our program will begin in a short while. This is to request everyone to kindly shift their attention to their respective screens for the invocation and the singing of our national anthem. Thank you.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiging telas ng sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa dikit mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa mandulupin, di ka pasisingin, sa nagagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pangaw, ay hinatang tulakawin sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na naghihiling, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di maghihiling. Lumalang araw ng warhabit pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya na pagkay magamit, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful day that you have given to us. Thank you for bringing us together as we learn from each other. And we bless all our speakers and panelists that they may be guided. Thank you, and this we ask. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and our tourism stakeholders who are joining via Zoom webinar, and to our viewers on Facebook Live. Welcome to the seminar on tourism and rural development with the theme Tourism Recovery Beyond 2020. I am Nika Tolentino, your host and moderator for today's seminar. This event is organized by the Office of Tourism Development Planning, Research, and Information Management of the Philippine Department of Tourism, with the support of the UN World Tourism Organization. The objective of today's seminar is in line with the designation of 2020 as the Year of Tourism and Rural Development. That is to impart the latest information and planned initiatives of the Department of Tourism in having tourism as the tool of recovering in this pandemic, and to acknowledge and provide practical guidelines and on how to ensure sustainable development for rural and natural areas. To officially open the program, we have with us the UN World Tourism Organization Executive Director, His Excellency Mr. Zhu Zhangzhong, to deliver a message of support.
Your Excellency, Secretary, Department of Tourism, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to send you the best wishes of the World Tourism Organization. This event comes at the vital time. All around the world, tourism has been hit hard by the global pandemic. At the same time, the social and economic benefits only our sector can deliver are needed than ever. The seminar also comes at the end of what has been a challenging year for all, as we look ahead to the future with determination. 2020 is a year of tourism and rural development. It was also the theme of the World Tourism Day. This year, our International Day of Observation for Tourism enjoyed great visibility than in the past. Around the world, people were made aware of the power of tourism to create opportunities outside of big cities. In the Philippines, tourism has been recognized and embraced as a pillar of rural development. The sector supports many jobs and businesses, providing a lifeline for rural communities across the country. It also helps protect and promote the special cultural and natural heritage of the Philippines. On behalf of UNWTO, I applaud your government for their hard work and vision for tourism as a driver for development for all. The theme of this seminar, Tourism Beyond 2020, Tourism and Rural Development, will ensure this momentum carries on into the new year. It also advances one of the UNWTO's key priorities, greater cooperation between the public and private sectors. And it highlights the role domestic tourism can play in helping rural communities recover while we wait for confidence in international travel to return. Once again, thank you for organizing this important and highly relevant seminar. We will follow the conversation and take note of the key outputs as we work together to restart tourism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, Mr. Zhu Zhanzhong, Executive Director of the UN World Tourism Organization, for your message of support and in cordial appreciation of the collective efforts of the Philippine tourism industry. On this note, let us proceed to the interesting and informative presentations of our esteemed speaker for today.
To discuss our first topic this afternoon on moving forward with rural tourism, let us all welcome the founder of Grassroots Travel. He's also part of the Board of Directors for Asian Ecotourism Network, Director of Ecotourism, Eco Explorations, and Director of Philippine Parks and Biodiversity, a multi-awarded homegrown CBT expert, Mr. Joselito Boboy Costas.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to share with you my presentation. Okay, again, good afternoon. Her Excellency DOT Secretary Bernard Romulo Puyat, His Excellency Mr. Zhu Zhanzhong, Executive Director of the UNWTO, Mr. Benito Benzon Jr., DOT Undersecretary of Tourism Development, Attorney Guillermo Acido, Administrator of the Intramuros Administration and Chairperson of Task Force on Domestic Tourism Product and Market Development, Mr. Mario Hardy, CEO of the Pacific Asia Travel Association, our panel of reactors. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. Even before the pandemic, rural areas have already been plagued with issues such as aging population, decline in traditional economic activities, limited services, migration, and access to infrastructure and IT. In this pandemic, the role of tourism in rural development is more relevant than ever as tourists hunker for space and the outdoors. It's where opportunities for recovery awaits. With 80% of all people in extreme poverty living in rural communities, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, tourism can help improve the quality of life in rural areas, mitigating demographic challenges, reducing migration, providing services and infrastructure, and promoting local resources and traditions while upholding the essence of countrysides. I'll start this presentation with slides of locals in rural destinations I work with. Before and during this pandemic, and even today, I was just talking to the officers and the members, and what's keeping them busy under the lockdown. So helping the local government enforce the lockdown, guarding the marine sanctuary for poachers, or reviving traditional economic activities for income. There are communities readying the opening of tourism through river cleanup, installing signage, even electing officers, attending online trainings, and just this morning, receiving care packages from the private sector, SMART and PLDT, to be specific about it. Over there in a protected area in Leyte, a local community has implemented new normal protocols, collecting river biology data, attending a series of online trainings, and just before lockdown in March, women helped build a graded trail to a hot spring. These activities show how rural communities are keeping their heads above water in these trying times, a crisis of unprecedented proportions. Why is this pandemic a crisis? First, it is global. This is not geographically defined and definitely not local. We know crises in the past were local. Second, it's synchronous. It happened all at once all over the world, but it doesn't mean recovery will also happen at the same time all over the world. And this has a big impact on redesigning our response and recovery strategies. Next, it is uncertain. It's not ending, or at least we don't know when. So the uncertainty makes the planning and response definitely more difficult and sometimes maybe impossible. It's far-reaching. Tourists and the tourism we once knew have disappeared. And it's far-reaching because no destination can proclaim itself to be safe. No amount of PR or image building can do that. And those which claim to be safe will just be disappointed. Next, it's existential. It's a survival issue. Tourism will be back at a certain point, but will we be still around? Which tourism actors, which tourism stakeholders will survive until then? It's an existential issue because tourism is the victim. It's a victim, but also a major accomplice in the transmission and escalation of COVID from a local epidemic into a global pandemic. Tourism is a highly vulnerable industry and business, and this pandemic sort of marks the end of the kind of optimism we have known in tourism for so many years. So that leads us to the question, are we having too much tourism? But this pandemic is also an opportunity for transformation, if you will. On sustainability, for example, the opportunity to embrace and mainstream sustainability and the SDGs, to become greener and to transition to the circular economy. The pandemic has compelled people, especially in rural communities, to shift to digital technology, boosting innovation and creativity for visitor management and destination promotion through digital storytelling, online reservation, and even cashless transactions. And there's a sudden shift to nature. Nature is the new normal. There is a strong need of nature and an improved relationship and appreciation with nature. Stakeholder cooperation is key to rethink, reshape, reevaluate policies in destinations to become more sustainable. Impact on sustainability. The impacts of this crisis are highly localized but felt globally. Reopening tourism and rebuilding destinations will require a more coordinated approach due to the interdependent nature of tourism services. And from my own experience and observation under this pandemic, there's a loss of income and jobs, but there are also new jobs, new sources of income through new jobs through diversification of the tourism offer and new services, reviving traditional economic activities and promotion and selling of the local products online. There's a significant increase of the use of nature to improve mental health and well-being of locals and visitors affected by the pandemic. There is now awareness about the importance of spending time in nature. Less travel as a whole, so less carbon emission, rise of online meetings, safe and paperless productivity, improved community relationship thanks to the need to cooperate because of the sense of community under a crisis, being more innovative and having to continue to adapt and use hard times to improve will increase resilience to the current and future shocks. Increase in the pride of local people of their own culture. Think about pride in serving as volunteers, health workers, and frontliners. And there's a renewed sense of local ownership. Impact on governance. On governance, the community's visions and goals have focused on healthy, safe, and sustainable travel, individual and organizational capacity building, digital solutions, and promoting nature-based tourism. Shift in governance structure towards public-private partnerships outside the organization and into the community, like contact tracing and checkpoints. The approach is decentralized, joint decision-making between stakeholders, such as public health workers and communities, and new ways to collaborate with stakeholders. Decision-making process became more democratic from bottoms up or from the grassroots up, and it's flexible and fast because of the crisis. Relationship between local government and communities are getting stronger with same goals of involving, engaging, and improving local community participation and keeping regular communications open with all. There's solid and sustainable positive changes in governance structure, decision-making process, working with stakeholders as response to the pandemic and in crisis. But the question remains, will the institutions and the individuals want to continue this model of cooperation beyond the pandemic? And what are the impacts on financing? Public funds. Government shifted focus to remediation of the pandemic. The available money was being spent to deal with direct impacts of COVID, resulting in less opportunities available for public funding of development initiatives. Private funds. The private sector came with non-financial support, such as providing face masks, food bags, disinfectants, PPE. These funds were good for trust building and creating sense of ownership. On resilience, zero tourist arrivals means zero revenues. The pandemic showed high dependence from tourist income and other fees. Communities showed resiliency through traditional economic activities such as fishing, farming, or weaving. Innovative funding schemes using digital platforms to look for external funds through partnership and sponsorship with the private sector. So, how do we move forward? After the pandemic, competition will be harsh and will be stiff as destinations reposition themselves. There is a need for market intelligence and data to better plan, measure, and manage tourism and promote evidence-based policies. Indicators of sustainability to boost competitiveness and resilience must be established and monitored. Second, innovation and digital transformation should guide the development of tourism product, infrastructure, experiences, and mobility. Connectivity and access to technology ensure market access for tourism businesses and a safe, positive experience for travelers. Governments in all levels should have active policies to develop and manage tourism in rural areas more effectively and sustainably in the form of regulatory framework, investment, guidance, and incentives for SMEs and entrepreneurs, education and skills training for locals and professionals, and the government should endeavor to provide jobs that are fair and decent, and that destinations, products, and services are accessible and sustainable. Thank you very much, and again, good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you very much for that very wonderful insight on the presentation, Mr. Costas. We are indeed lucky to have such an experienced community development expert for this seminar. For our Zoom webinar participants, you may key in your questions by the Q&A tab or comment sections. Questions will be entertained during the panel discussion later after all presenters have finished with their presentations. So once again, thank you, Mr. Buboy Costas. Now, for our second topic on the discourse of domestic tourism development and tourism recovery, please welcome the administrator of the Intramuros administration and chairperson of the Task Force on Domestic Tourism, Product and Market Development, Attorney Guilherme D. Asido.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us and having this conversation regarding domestic tourism as a road for tourism recovery as well. So allow me to share my screen for a few seconds before I start the presentation for today. Okay. Ever since the lockdown, the common question that has been asked of us is when will tourism resume its operations and how do we move forward given the current public health challenges? At the very onset of the pandemic, there was a strategic direction already to really look at where we are right now in terms of the situation of tourism, and knowing the impact that the pandemic has caused to the industry, we had time to assess ourselves and really look at where the industry should really be move forward already, and what needs to be done in order to jumpstart the industry, particularly in terms of travel confidence. So let me start off with giving you a background on the importance and value of domestic tourism. In the case of the country, okay, 10.8% of the tourism industry's 12.7% contribution to the country's gross domestic tourism product in 2019 was contributed by tourism. And if you look at domestic tourism, it was actually the biggest contributor of the industry at 3.1 trillion pesos. Now, this number is not just for 2019, but if you look at the number basically as well for the past several years, it has been very consistent in terms of its growth and in terms as well of its contribution to the economy. So if you look at the numbers that we are sharing to you right now from 2005 until the immediate year of past year of 2019, you see all very positive growth rates, and you see the positive growth rates as well in terms of actual contribution, or what we refer to as tourism receipts to the economy. Now, of course, the numbers will drastically change for this year, and what we need to do moving forward is how to pivot towards adapting to those challenges as well. Okay. Now, last middle of June, the Department of Tourism, before undertaking the strategic shift towards domestic tourism, conducted what we refer to as a sentiment survey, or what we refer to as the Philippine Travel Survey Report. This was conducted basically to look at the sentiment of the Filipino traveler once we see that there are changes already in the current situation that we are all confronted with. So, based on that study, which was conducted by the Asian Institute of Management in close consultation with the department, domestic travel will lead the recovery of the Philippines tourism industry, with Filipino travelers expecting to go to destinations closer to home and spending less in the midst of health concerns caused by COVID-19. So, given this sentiment survey, what we need to do what we did was to adapt towards those changes that we are already seeing right now. So, these are just some of the highlights of that sentiment survey that was conducted middle of this year. So health and safety remains the primary concern of our travelers, and our travelers prefer reduced contact activities once the leisure travel restrictions are lifted. And of course, our travelers prefer online and digital channels for convenience and reduced contact. This is why, with the current situation, what we are doing right now is issuing guidelines, rules and regulations, guidelines to ensure that all of these concerns regarding contact activities and then preference for online and digital channels are properly adapted. And this will be reflected in the following slides that we will be presenting. Now, the survey also found out that domestic travel will lead the recovery of the travel industry, with 77% of respondents expressing their willingness to travel to local destination once restrictions are lifted, and once they are assured that the necessary health and safety protocols are in place. Now, given the situation, the department did was to adopt two basic strategies in order to jumpstart domestic travel. One is what we refer to as the participatory action plan. Now, this action plan is consistent with the bottom-up approach that is provided in the National Tourism Development Plan, dated 2016 to 2022. We also are adopted the strategy of capacity building not just for the stakeholders, private stakeholders, but capacity building as well for the local government units, who are the key partners towards domestic tourism. So let me just move forward and show to you what we have done for the past few months in terms of ensuring that we pivot towards domestic tourism. In July of this year, Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat issued the department order that created the Task Force on Domestic Tourism Product and Market Development. This is basically a all department approach in ensuring that we adopt and reconsider all matters pertaining to jumpstarting domestic travel. In August 2020, we held a series of consultations and a charrette for the development of a strategic domestic tourism program with regional offices. And the first speaker, Boboy Costas, was actually one of those who briefed and had sufficiently uh, provided inputs as well to our regional offices regarding the development of what we refer to as the regional circuits and what we refer to as the tourism framework for sustainable development. In September of 2020, we conducted capacity building sessions, consultations of regional offices, provincial tourism officers, city tourism officers on crisis management and domestic travel bubbles. We also led the review of the department's PAPs or programs, activities, and projects to ensure that we pivot towards domestic tourism. And in October 2020, we submitted and sought approval, and which the secretary approved as well, the Sustainable Tourism Framework Development Framework for Product Development Standards. The intent of the framework is to ensure that we do not consider or use sustainable tourism merely as a policy statement or as a buzzword, but really live up to its principles and policies to ensure that sustainable tourism and its inclusiveness will be the main policy statements or the main policy anchors towards the future of tourism in the country. From November until early part of this month, we conducted a series of validation trips to ascertain the readiness of the regions and their specific local government units in accepting domestic tourists in their generic and specific activities. For the validation trip, the intention was to determine compliance and see how the department can be of assistance to the local government units and to our stakeholders in ensuring that we really properly and safely, okay, open up tourism at the local level. So we also had a series of stakeholders, local dialogues. This was done basically after all of the validation as a mean of feedback mechanism to the local government units. The secretary herself led the dialogue in terms of uh, uh, providing proper assistance to the local governments and to see how we can all partner towards the safe opening of tourism in the areas. The Tourism Promotions Board, um, an attached agency of the Department of Tourism, also launched a series of programs and activities to assist in jumpstarting domestic travel in the country. Okay? So these are just some of the images of the validation trips and the dialogues that we conducted. The Secretary of Tourism visited Ilocos Sur, the municipality of Tublay and Benguet. And during those visits, we did the proper validations prior to the actual dialogue and consultations, gave, it, gave our feedback to the local government unit leaders and to the private stakeholders on how we can actually ensure safety, how we can actually ensure the health of our visitors. So the validation does not cover only at the cover the accommodation establishments. The validation trips conducted by the teams that came from the central office and also from other agencies attached to the department looked at as well the health facilities and trying to get the assurance as well that there are not just protocols but actual protocols that can be observed in terms of ensuring health and safety. So they look at as well the readiness of the health facilities to address the number of visitors that may be arriving. And in Tublay Benguet, the secretary also looked at the matter of the readiness of a farm tourism site in the municipality. We also conducted a validation visit and dialogue with the local government unit of Mabini, Batangas. In this particular visit, we looked at the readiness of the destination, which is basically heavily relying on dive tourism. So the uh, Commission on Sports and Scuba Diving actually looked at the readiness of the sites in accepting and also in ensuring compliance with health and safety protocols. And in that visit as well, we after the validations were given, proper feedback was given to the local government, there was also a discussion and a dialogue with the secretary leading the stakeholders in terms of consultations with the local government unit as well. And that led to several initiatives on the part of the local government. For example, in ensuring that there can be proper mechanisms for the conduct of the RT-PCR tests. One other important visit was the matter of Boracay. And in that visit, the secretary was also with the Secretary of Interior and Local Government and the Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources. In that visit, the cabinet secretaries looked at as well the health and safety facilities. And prior to their visit, we also conducted uh, the proper validations of the readiness of the accommodations. And these were all given in terms of proper feedback to the local government units and to the accommodation establishment concerns as well. We also did a validation and also the proper dialogue with the local government unit of the province of Surigao del Norte and also the different municipalities in Siargao, the island of Siargao. So this was done in order to ascertain whether, aside from the matter of having health and safety protocols in an ordinance, what is the level of compliance, and do the stakeholders really understand, and do the stakeholders really have an active participation in terms of ensuring compliance. So these were all conducted immediately after the visit to Boracay, and the stakeholders actually had a good dialogue in terms of ensuring that we comply not just with the mere issuance of health and safety protocols executive orders, but ensuring that there is proper interaction, there is proper consultation between the stakeholders of Siargao, private stakeholders of Siargao, and the local government units concerned. Now, in all of those validation visits as well, and in some of the dialogues that we conducted, there was also active participation of the led Tourism Congress of the Philippines was properly represented, and there was also actual proper feedback in terms of the viewpoint coming from the private sector. And in terms of ensuring that there are proper mechanisms as well for jumpstarting domestic travel, the Tourism Promotions Board, for example, provided technical assistance and resources for the rebranding of Baguio City. And they also provided the necessary resources for the visitor management information system that is continuously being adopted and implemented by the local government of Baguio City. And because of the support and assistance that has been provided by the Tourism Promotions Board to the city of Baguio, Baguio City right now is considered to be one of the main benchmark in terms of how do you properly restart domestic travel. Now, assistance was also provided to the province of Paklan to cover as well the RT-PCR testing of the frontliners. So this initiative ensured that we are not just looking at the proper protection of health and safety of our visitors. We also would like to ensure confidence on the part of the visitor, given the provision of RT-PCR testing, testing for the frontliners of Boracay. And just recently, the Tourism Promotions Board, in order to initiate, incentivize as well domestic travel, executed a memorandum of agreement with the UPPGH to subsidize 50% of the least lowest cost in terms of RT-PCR tests for qualified domestic tourists. So this is an uh, government to government arrangement between UPPGH and to the Tourism Promotions Board, led by the Secretary herself, acting as chairperson of the TPB, to provide assistance to qualified domestic tourists who would like to, who are being required to undertake RT-PCR testing. Now, information is the main create information is the main um, engine in terms of ensuring that we provide proper guidance to the visitors. So the Tourism Promotions Board created through the active participation of the branding unit of the Department of Tourism as well, a travel app. So it doesn't have to be downloaded just like any other app. No need to install as well. You just go to your browser and you can type in the um, URL address, and you can load it already the travel app that will provide almost regularly updated information in terms of the sites that are open and what are the different protocols and guidelines that are required at the local level. So currently, the department continues to improve and will be implementing the revised program actions, activities, and plans for the remaining period of 2020, and also pivot towards domestic travel in 2021. So, in terms of the data development, which is an important matter in terms of ensuring that there is proper decision making in terms of the policies and the directions of domestic tourism, a series of regional workshops has been established to identify the key indicators and develop the rapid estimation methodology for measuring the monthly domestic performance of the tourism industry. Now, this development of the data is important to ensure that we have access to accurate information that will be important input towards proper decision making. So we are now in the level of preparing the domestic tourism strategic action plan, which will be focusing on sustainable and inclusive tourism. The department will also be leading the development of the Tourism Product Development Manual that will be given to all local government units to serve as proper input in, for the development of their local tourism plans. We also are now undertaking a research to support culture-based tourism, another tourism product which we would like to pivot towards too. And also, the department is now leading the review of the National Ecotourism Strategy. Now, with all of these programs and with the proper data tool being developed already, what we are looking forward to is a proper development of the domestic tourism plan and action plan that will happen not just in 2021 but beyond the particular year as well. So let me summarize what we have learned so far in terms of the pivot towards domestic tourism. One is the importance of inclusive dialogue, and dialogue meaning not just holding regular meetings, but also inclusive dialogue in terms of ensuring that all issues, all concerns are properly addressed. So the dialogue is basically not just between the national government and the local government unit, but most importantly, the private sector. And when I speak of the private sector here, we are more inclusive in terms of the definition. That includes the formal and informal sectors as well, to ensure that all issues pertaining to um, domestic travel and also tourism in general are particularly addressed. The other one is the other one is also the important value of capacity building of our local government and stakeholders. We should really reinforce capability building initiative of our local government unit and stakeholders. The crisis that we are facing right now will definitely face a situation where there may be another crisis that will affect the industry, whether it's climate change or any other natural or man-made disaster. What we need to ensure, and this is not just to romanticize the word resiliency, but also to ensure that we provide proper capability programs for our local government units and our stakeholders, given the country's dependence on tourism. The other important learning is the value of communication and information. While we do have dependence already on technology as the primary tool for provision of communication and information, what we do realize is a more important matter of providing ground level communication and information, particularly ensuring that this will all lead to inclusivity and continuity of the programs that have been identified by the Department of Tourism. So again, all of these learnings amount to ensuring not just that we address the current public health challenges, but also ensuring that the industry is ready for any situation that we may be confronted with again in the next few years, for example. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions in the panel discussion.
Thank you very much for that enlightening presentation, Administrator Asido. Such an encouraging talk in the steady push for domestic tourism development as we now heavily rely on the Philippines' strong domestic tourism base. For our third presenter to discuss the new normal trends in tourism, we are fortunate to have with us the Chief Executive Officer of the Pacific Asia Travel Association and a good friend of Philippine tourism, Dr. Mario Hardy.
A very good afternoon to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon from beautiful Bangkok. I do actually love the Philippines very much. What I like the most is actually the people of the Philippines. You have, as it was demonstrated in both of the presentations before, you have this remarkable ability to bounce back and be resilient in sometimes some of the worst crises that the world has seen before. Sadly, the Philippines has been hit by numerous crises over the years. But people in the Philippines always smile and always ready to have fun and party and restart again and welcome their guests. So congratulations to all of you for that. I did enjoy both presentations before from Joselito and Aki, which I think covered pretty much all the very important points and asked them some very interesting questions about the future of tourism. One question that Joselito asked before was, do we have too many tourists, or did we have many tourists pre-COVID-19? And my answer to this would be, actually, I don't think we did. However, I would argue that there maybe actually was not distributed well enough. That many parts of the world, or out of the 7,000 plus islands that the Philippines have, many destinations probably didn't have their fair share of tourists, while others probably had too many. So I think it's a question of managing capacity and redistribution, something that we were already discussing pre-COVID-19 with the tourism organizations and tourism boards across the world here at PATA. Something that is worth looking much closer moving forward as we restart travel and have now this incredible opportunity to restart in a different way, in a better way. So I think many of the questions that were asked by the previous presenters are actually really critical to spend a bit of time to reflect on it and figure out what is the best way forward. One of the things over the last couple of months that we've done at PATA is through our partners is the sentiment analysis across China, Europe, and other parts of the world, across Asia also, to find out, are people thinking of traveling? Do they have a desire to travel overseas when borders are reopened? And the response is absolutely. People are dreaming to travel. They're just waiting for the borders to safely reopen to be able to travel overseas again. And we know that from research when people look at OTAs or TripAdvisor, Expedia, and other OTAs around the world, when they're actually searching. They're searching for their next holidays, where they're going to go, what activities they will do, what type of places they want to stay. But also what has been very interesting in these research is looking at what are they looking at? And they are looking at actually destinations that are more green, eco-friendly. Rural tourism, for example, might be much more attractive to them than it was before. They want to be away from crowded places. They want to be in nature-based destinations. But I also paying a lot of attention to health, safety, and hygiene, about the hotels and the places they're going to stay, the airline they will fly with, and the destinations itself. What reputation does it have in health and hygiene? What protocols are in place to ensure their safety as they're actually thinking of traveling for the future? So I think the destinations and businesses in travel and tourism, those are very important points for you to think about when you restart your travel, when you start welcoming guests into your properties again, when you start actually thinking about marketing your destination and your product and your services, that you keep these aspects in mind as to what people are actually looking for. To me, there are actually three areas in terms of innovation moving forward that are actually really important. There's a first element, which is the health and safety and hygiene protocols in place. They're here to stay. Even post-COVID, they will remain. They will remain critical and important. And technology and services that are actually being created today to cope with COVID-19 are really critical to restart. That's the first phase. That's the most critical part at the moment that we need to look at. Health passports, just as a common pass, or the IATA Health Pass, Travel Health Pass, or others, similar services, touchless check-in or touchless immigration, and to attractions and airlines as well are really important. Those are actually technologies that are already available before, but now being accelerated as well. The second is digital transformation, which was mentioned a little bit before as well. It was already happening before. Now it's being accelerated much, much faster. Cashless payment is growing at a phenomenal rate across the world. Norway just announced recently that actually in 2019, only 4% of all transactions throughout the year were done with actually physical money, cash. 96% were digital payments. So they're actually almost to 100%. Sweden is moving at a really fast pace. China is moving at a fast pace. Singapore is moving at a fast pace with digital payment also. And other destinations are moving in the same direction. Again, consideration that needs to be taken by your respective businesses and destinations for the future. As people start traveling overseas again, they'll be used to cashless payment and will come to expect it at some point in the future also in the respective destinations. Other technology that relates to digital transformations are also critical for small businesses, SMEs that may not have been have an active website or dynamic website or even a mobile site at the moment. Now more than ever, it is absolutely critical and necessary for you to migrate into the digital era. And lastly, the other area which is also critical is operations. We know also that thousands, hundreds of thousands of small businesses, SMEs, have not survived this pandemic and will not survive this pandemic. But for those who remain, in place, costs will be absolutely necessary to reduce costs moving forward in order to keep their operations afloat. And therefore, any technology solutions or services that would enable us to improve their return on investment, to reduce their costs, improve their ROI, will actually be an absolute necessity moving forward. So those are three areas that I believe of innovation that are actually important to keep in mind as we start reopening and prepare ourselves for a very different future. Lastly, I'd like to touch upon the topic that was addressed by both speakers before, which is around sustainability and environment, or essentially the UN SDGs, the 17 SDGs that were actually been given to us by the United Nations. Each one of those have somehow an implications from travel and tourism. And there are some that we as an industry can move forward much faster to get better at doing it, to make sure that we protect our environment. The environment is actually critical. The nature that we have is critical, that we maintain it as impeccable as possible to attract tourists to come and visit. It's not only actually being a responsibility of the government, it's a responsibility that we all have as individuals, as businesses, as well as the public sector. For us at PATA, we believe that the most critical and the most important SDG is number 17, as it was actually revealed in our annual summit in Cebu in 2019, when we had a debate about the infrastructure versus people, and ended up actually with 50-50 votes on both sides. Essentially meaning that actually number 17, which is partnership for the goal, is really critical. It's excessively important in this particular instance, more than any other time, for both private and public sector to work together hand in hand to make sure we get through this crisis as quickly and safely as possible moving forward. It also means partnership between government departments, not only tourism, but other departments actually are impacted by travel and tourism, as well as the private sector before. So I look forward to the panel discussions and happy to answer questions a little bit later on through the Q&A. And thank you very much for your time. And again, to wish you a wonderful day. And also take the opportunity to wish everyone a happy holiday season, which is just around the corner, and hopefully a much, much better 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such an impressive talk. It shows indeed the competence of Dr. Hardy in terms of tourism trends. We are glad to have PATA as a reliable partner throughout the years. Again, a reminder for our Zoom webinar participants, you may key in your questions via the Q&A tab or comments sections. Questions will be entertained during the panel discussion at the latter part of the program. For the fourth and final topic, to discuss on the country's path to recovery and our strengthening of international tourism cooperation, please welcome the highly respected Undersecretary for Tourism Development, Mr. Benito C. Bangzon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Zhu Sanzhong, the Executive Director of UNWTO, Mr. Joselito Boboy Costas, Founder, Grassroots Travel and Community-Based Tourism Expert, Attorney Guilherme Asido, the Administrator of Intramuros Administration and the Chairperson of the Task Force on Domestic Tourism and Market Development, Dr. Mario Hardy, CEO of PATA, Mr. Jojo Clement, President of Tourism Congress of the Philippines and Raja Tours Philippines, Dr. Tina Aquino, the Chair of Tourism Industry Board Foundation, Mr. Ramon Jerry Cabalce, President Batanes Wakay Travel and Tours Incorporated, Associate Professor Jesus G.C. Granado, Dean, College of Tourism and Hospitality Management, University of Santo Tomas, our partners from the private sector, fellow workers in government, a warm mabuhay to all of you. This afternoon, I've been tasked to talk about tourism cooperation and the country's path to recovery. And hopefully we can give you an idea of where the global tourism industry is at the moment, how it is faring in terms of recovery, and how the Philippines itself will also move towards recovery. So in this particular topic, we'll be sharing with you very quickly some information based on the reports from the United Nations World Tourism Organization and also the current developments on tourism cooperation, particularly in the ASEAN region. We talk about the measures that are being taken, the efforts to ensure the revitalization of the industry, and of course, the importance of making sure that we all work together. The next slide will provide you a snapshot of the current situation. This particular slide will show you how the pandemic has impacted on tourism around the globe and in the Philippines. The 70% that you see on the left-hand portion represents the decline in global arrivals for the period January to August 2020. And the figure on the right, the 76.3, will reflect the decrease in foreign arrivals to the Philippines. And this has also resulted in a corresponding decrease in receipts of about 75.2%. In terms of comparing our decrease with the other areas around the world, Asia and the Pacific registered decrease of 79%, also for the same period, January to August. Africa and the Middle East is at minus 69%. Europe is at minus 68%. And the Americas would be at the minus 65%. Perhaps the minus 79 for Asia and the Pacific is not really that surprising, considering that the region has always set the trend in terms of visitor movement or inbound visitor movement around the globe. But what is clear is that the pandemic has spared no one. It has affected all regions, all countries around the globe. Next, please. So as Romulo Puyat immediately instructed us to prepare a tourism response and recovery plan. And I think the DOT was probably one of the first line agencies to prepare a sector-specific or industry-specific recovery plan. This particular blueprint has the following thrusts. Number one is to protect and ensure employment during the crisis, and of course, even after the crisis. The second is to make sure that the government and the private sector will work cohesively towards a sustainable and resilient tourism industry. And then the third one talks about essentially the policies and guidelines for the new normal. Next, please. In terms of the thematic outcomes of the TRRP, the first one talks about making sure that we secure the livelihood of the workers. We're able to provide adequate social services, and I will discuss this in detail a little later. The second one talks about sustaining business operations, providing a lifeline to the different tourism enterprises that have been severely hit and have had no steady revenue stream in the last 9 to 10 months. The third one talks about providing appropriate infrastructure, building back better to make sure that we are able to adapt to the new normal. And the last thematic outcome talks about enhanced marketing and product development. And as Administrator Guillier mentioned earlier, there will be a pivot or a shift towards domestic tourism, which will also require the development of new products that will be more responsive to the needs of the new set of consumers in the new normal. Next. So what are the measures and initiatives that the country has taken to address the impact of the pandemic on the tourism industry? About a month and a half ago, our legislators passed the Bayanihan 2 or the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, which provided working capital loans for businesses. So we have approximately 6 billion pesos that has been allocated to provide working capital loans, particularly to micro, small, and medium enterprises. We did an inventory, and about 95% of all tourism enterprises in the Philippines would belong to this category. The terms are very attractive: zero interest, no collateral. There's just a small service fee that has to be paid. The third column will show you support to tourism workforce, and under the Bayanihan 2, there is also a program between the Department of Tourism and Department of Employment, which provides about 3.1 billion pesos for displaced tourism workers. And again, this is our way of providing assistance to those who have been severely affected. And as of December 16, we have already assisted about 32,000 beneficiaries with a total payout of about 160 million. And in terms of the working capital loans, as of December 3, we have processed the applications of about 269 applicants with a total loan amount of 167 million pesos. The portion on the right-hand side talks about domestic tourism survey. In May of this year, we conducted a survey on domestic traveler sentiment. We will do a follow-up survey this month. We hope to complete it by the third week of January. And apart from determining if there have been changes in consumer preferences, behavior, or sentiments, we will also be looking at the supply side. So the follow-up survey will include getting the inputs of tourism enterprises on the supply side, particularly accommodation establishments, tourist transport facilities, MICE facilities, among others. Next, please. So moving now into cooperation at the ASEAN level, to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the industry, the ASEAN member states have implemented various measures to support the challenged industry. There will basically be two directions: the provision of fiscal and non-fiscal support to our stakeholders, and the assistance towards building a tourism industry relying on digital systems, which have emerged as imperatives. So the ASEAN member states will provide fiscal and non-fiscal support to their respective tourism industries through policies and programs such as the deferment of taxes and other fees at varying coverage for each member state, the provision of soft loans and financial assistance to businesses, particularly to MSMEs and displaced workers. And the third one, this has been mentioned by the earlier speakers, capacity development programs. So these are very good measures that are already available for tourism stakeholders. And we're hoping that this can be adopted on a wider scale. Another move is based on the agreement of the ASEAN tourism ministers earlier this year. Of course, they acknowledged that moving forward, ASEAN tourism must become more competitive. It has to be more integrated by essentially applying digital economy principles to aid in travel facilitation, business transactions, marketing, and even in destination management and operation. And this is reflected in the Declaration on Digital Tourism, which was recently adopted during the ASEAN Leaders Summit in November. So this will become the basis for future policies on innovation and digitalization for ASEAN tourism. The ASEAN member states, through their respective national tourism organizations or NTOs, have likewise aligned various programs and initiated new activities to promote the effective recovery of ASEAN tourism. And one way to restart tourism activities is on facilitating travel bubbles. In order to resume movement of the tourism industry and to promote economic recovery for the sector, the ASEAN puts emphasis on a well-facilitated, well-thought-out travel bubble or travel corridor scheme for its local and other accessible markets, as recommended by the UNWTO. And this initiative has also been approved by the ASEAN leaders last month and is currently undergoing the necessary planning and negotiations and fine-tuning. On ensuring safety and regaining confidence to On ensuring safety and regaining confidence to travel, the ASEAN tourism ministers have mandated the enhanced operation of the ASEAN Tourism Crisis Communications Team with a view to providing timely and reliable information for travelers and tourism operators throughout the region. The ASEAN seeks to have a consolidated approach through minimum standards and protocols that will allow for the resumption of tourism activities across the region. Lastly, focusing on new normal markets and products refer to the prioritization of marketing and product development efforts on source markets that have a proven record of strong turnouts and the volume that could help the industry bounce back. And as the focus on tourism for the immediate time frame will shift from tapping global markets into harnessing the potential of domestic travelers, ASEAN gives particular attention to the accessibility of short-haul markets and offering tourism products and experiences fitted for the standards of the new normal, such as enhanced ecotourism subsector, rural tourism, and a more specialized tourism product portfolio away from the mass market tourism templates of the pre-pandemic industry. So with the various initiatives launched and in the pipeline, we can now look into the prospect of a recovering industry. And by taking a look at where we currently stand, we can better prepare and have an better outlook of what lies ahead. The number of destinations closed to international tourism has continued to fall, so many are opening up. And according to the 8th edition of the UNWTO report, 70% of all global destinations have somehow eased restrictions on travel in response to COVID-19 pandemic. In comparison, just 1 in 4 destinations continue to keep their borders completely closed to international traffic. The report shows that as of November 1, a total of 152 destinations have eased restrictions on international tourism, which is an increase from 115 recorded in September. At the same time, 59 destinations have kept their borders closed to tourists, which is a decrease from the 34 that we recorded 2 months ago. As for the Philippines, we continue to address the health-related concerns of the pandemic. We are presented with the opportunity to build competence and plan ahead. And as a global gap is shown, the UNWTO found that destinations with higher scores in health and hygiene indicators, as well as on the Environmental Performance Index, are among those which have eased restrictions faster. Moreover, these destinations are increasingly applying differentiated risk-based approaches to implementing travel restrictions. For the Philippines, to continue on the path to recovery, we should take advantage of the following key points. Number 1, gradual or partial reopening given the arrangements currently being pursued with our regional and bilateral partners would be an efficient way of opening the flow of travelers without overwhelming our newly established mechanisms. Through a continuing tourism cooperation effort, we are to link with the destinations that are of equal or relative level in the implementation of standards for travelers. So this is the central idea behind the development of travel corridors. Another is maximizing the strong domestic tourism base that we have. As we are all aware, the Philippines is lucky to have a very strong foundation when it comes to domestic travelers. And through concerted effort across the country and in acknowledgement of major collaborations, we can steadily support the renewal of confidence to travel among Filipinos. And lastly, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, we must take this opportunity to reorganize, to align our goals collectively as an industry, and integrate our efforts towards a safer, more responsible, more sustainable, more inclusive tourism development. It is this principle that tourism can support rural development. As we make that shift from conventional or mass tourism, we must give way to ecotourism and focus on nature-based attractions. We must be ready to address not only the environmental issues, but also the socio-economic impacts of these activities. So the Department of Tourism will continue to work towards the goals of a more sustainable tourism industry, not only because of our mandate, but also because we see the importance of providing the benefits across a wider net, a wider area. To the Filipino people in general, the different communities, the professionals, the different families who rely on tourism and who must be given hope as we move forward. So with that, I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to share with you our plans for tourism. Together, we can make the world experience once again why it is more fun in the Philippines under a new and better normal for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Bengson, for the encouraging discussion on the industry path moving forward, and particularly on highlighting the available assistance for our tourism stakeholders under the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act and on the opportunities. For the information of our Zoom webinar attendees, Copies of the presentation shall be available after the webinar once you've completed the post-event survey, which will be prompted at the end of this webinar. So everyone, please be advised that we'll be having a very short four-minute break. While on break, we'll be flashing a poll to gather gender disaggregated data for the seminar.
Today, I woke up in a historic playground where fun dates back to the 16th century. Things are pretty old school here. Really old school. We get our thrills in a giant sandbox and spend all day playing in the water, where adventures come by the hundreds. This is a place where time stands absolutely still. But we can never seem to.
I woke up inside an artist's dream. Where the paintings dance with every brushstroke, and works of art span from floor to ceiling. I witness masters at their craft who transform even the ordinary into exceptional. Confections came in more colors than I could imagine. And a creative escape waited around every corner.
I woke up to my own adventure book, having no idea what was up next. Each page was different. Every chapter, a new surprise. All I could do was go along for the ride. Trust my gut and let the story unfold. Because here, the best travel plan is to make no plans and just let life happen.
Please welcome once again our moderator, Ms. Nika Tolentino.
Thank you and welcome back to our seminar. At this juncture, we now move to the panel discussion as we are joined by industry professionals who represent various backgrounds of the Philippine tourism industry. Our first panel reactor joining us virtually is a highly respected figure in Philippine tourism, the president of the Tourism Congress of the Philippines and of Raja Tours Philippines, Mr. Jose C. Clemente III. Also joining us virtually is the very energetic, driven, and competent chairperson of the Tourism Industry Board Foundation Incorporated, Dr. Maria Cristina G. Aquino. And with us on set, our third panel reactor, the creative and passionate president of Batanes Wakay Travel and Tours Incorporated, Mr. Ramon Jerry A. Cabalce. And last but definitely not the least, representing the academic community, the Dean of the College of Tourism and Hospitality Management of the University of Santo Tomas, Associate Professor Jesus Gezi G. Granado. For our panel discussion, we will first give each of our panel reactors a chance to share their thoughts, concerns, and questions relative to their background directly to our presenters. After all the reactors have finished their discussion with the presenters, we shall choose from questions coming from the question and answer tab of our Zoom webinar. All right. Once again, let's start with Mr. Jojo Clemente, sir.
Joy, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah. The buzzword of 2020. Uh, First of all, I would like to thank the Department of Tourism for inviting myself to this seminar. I would like to thank our speakers today for their valuable insights. A lot of things that are food for thought, no? And I'd like to greet also my fellow panelists. If I may go through the various presentations that were given to us briefly, no? Um, Going through the presentation of Sir Boboy, we agree that rural tourism really needs to be focused on. We need to encourage rural developments as a facet of tourism. This will be very crucial in terms of what we are able to show travelers once more, once people come back to the Philippines to travel. Sustainability will also be crucial. I think we're all in agreement with that because the more that we can reduce over tourism, as mentioned, I think there's a common thread among all the speakers. The more that we reduce over tourism in certain areas, the better for the environment and for our destinations. Doing rural tourism or continuing to develop rural tourism or rural development also broadens the financial effects and benefits of tourism throughout the country. The more we can spread the benefits of tourism, the better for us as a people, because everyone will now be given the opportunity to create more income for themselves and thus raising our livelihoods. LGU should start to really study the benefits of tourism for their communities to maximize the effects and uplift their constituents. What we have learned through the months of lockdown is that some LGUs are more focused or more in tune with tourism, while others are, if I may say so, still groping or still trying to find out really how to incorporate tourism into their community. So if we can come up with a common development plan for them, I think that will really help us as a destination. To Attorney Gillier's presentation, we've seen that the effect of domestic tourism is 3.1 trillion. No? When you look at the numbers for the international arrivals, that would only constitute a small percentage really of the total tourism revenue. So domestic tourism is really very important. It has become a necessity in our lives. It's no longer just a lifestyle for the rich and famous, but even for our medium, for the medium class people, even it's become something that is vital to our mental well-being, as we have also seen in the last 3 months of the lockdown. People are just aching to travel now. Attorney Gillier also talked about the various validation trips that they are taking. We have to take this opportunity to upgrade and improve where we can with the validation trips that were carried out. The past few months have been a sort of a reset button for us, and this gives us time to improve and to upgrade where we can, and for people to step up as far as what their tourism products are. What we've also seen, and this is going to be very important moving forward, is that compliance is important. There have been various cases throughout the lockdown wherein compliance has been not as strict with some of the areas that have already been open. And for us to be able to compete or to assure our potential travelers here that we are safe is that we have to show them that we are compliant with our health or global health and safety protocols. So that is something I hope our LGUs will take to mind. It has to be mentioned also that some of the measures already taken by the DOT and its attached agencies, such as the subsidized testing, are actually already above and beyond the mandate of the DOT. And they are doing this in the effort to really stimulate tourism. I hope our stakeholders are cognizant of that and appreciate also what has been done by the DOT and the attached agencies. We have also seen that the dialogue between the government and the shareholders has proven to be an effective way of dealing with the pandemic, especially as far as getting our concerns across to government. In the years that I have been president of the Tourism Congress, we have seen a heightened communications between the DOT, other government agencies, and the stakeholders. And this has proven to be an effective way, really, of moving forward. To Dr. Handy's presentation, he's correct. No, we have to diffuse the tour. We have to diffuse that management of destinations is something that will be very crucial moving forward. We have all been concentrated on just few places around the Philippines, and this is now the opportunity for our other destinations. We have 7,000 islands, and this is now the opportunity for other destinations to upgrade, to develop, and to offer more to our travelers. And they are looking, as Dr. Hardy said, no, they are looking for more experiences now, maybe experiences that they've never had before, more in-depth, more cultural interactions, and so on. So those are things that we need to work on. People are champing at the bit to travel, no? We've seen that, we've heard that even with our international markets as we've been doing market updates with the DOT. And I think, and I am of the impression, and I don't know if my other co-panelists will agree with me, that tourism will be quick to recover once it is already allowed to happen on a wide-scale basis. People are just so anxious to travel right now. It's a matter of just making sure that the places are safe and sound. We have the standards, everything. We will be able to recover, and quite quickly, if I may say so, once it is allowed. And we as stakeholders should re-examine how we operate and conduct our businesses, again, in conjunction with what Dr. Hardy mentioned. There should be ways now that we have developed to address the current situation, and moving forward again, should a similar incident or similar situation take place in the future. I think a lot of lessons can be learned from the past 9 months that we have been in lockdown. So, and then with Yusek Bong's presentation, I'd also like to reiterate that the communications between government and the stakeholders has really proven to be an effective way to tackle this. And we are very appreciative of the attention that the DOT, Secretary Puyat, and the rest of the DOT family, the attention that has been given to the private sectors as a team to come up with all of these various solutions to the pandemic. So those are my reactions to the presentations. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Sir Jojo. Thank you for the insights. May we hear now from Ms. Tina Aquino for your insights as well, ma'am.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to congratulate the presenters for bringing in good news for the tourism sector. When I was initially invited, the invitation had an on-site discussion, and I told Alex that my security was very intense. My children wouldn't allow me to go out, being a senior citizen already. And so he came back to me and said, oh, we're going to be doing a Zoom conference. I said, okay, that's good, well and good. And that sentiment actually is not just for me, but I think for a number of people as well. When the promise of going out already after being on lockdown for more than 9 months is already something that's looming in the very near future. And so going back to the discussion about tourism recovery beyond 2020 and tourism and rural development, let me just point out some important figures. There were a lot of people who are affected as a result of the COVID. In the Philippines, maybe 4.8 million, but I think PhilTOA's Mr. Cruz actually said that 5 million people lost their jobs already, or salaries are lower due to reduced work hours. So these 5 million people are looking for some kind of balance or some kind of support from either government or from their various enterprises as well. It's not just human resource, but it's also the enterprises who provide work for them. And so when Mario Hardy mentioned that tourism is about people service, I believe that is very exact about what tourism separates from the different other industries as well. And so we've got to look at how we can capacitate and increase the capability of workers, especially in tourism, in the light of many new protocols that are being implemented at the national, regional, and as well as the local. And sometimes they may not even meet on the same pane. It's very different. You know, IATF would say something, and then local government units will do a different thing. You have to also go back to one of the theories of motivation that will look at behavior, and this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If people are hungry, if the basic needs is not satisfied, then they'll do something really to make sure. So we cannot go beyond that until we are able to make sure that they are satisfied, and this is going to be through work that's going to be provided to them. And so enterprises have to start somewhere. And so I'm very happy that some are actually rebooting right now and starting operations, but not yet at the full blast that we have. You also have to take a look at the multiplier effect of what tourism has, because it's not just the primary enterprises that are involved in making sure that tourism runs, but because also of the support services that actually come into play with tourism. You've got the suppliers for food products, the suppliers for chemicals, the suppliers for basic things like maybe linen, or even things that we need now as a result of of the new protocols that we have. And so it has created a wave of human resource that will have to be trained in new things. Just last week, the TIBFI, the Tourism Industry Board Foundation, presented a webinar that had, in case you miss it, up and cross-skilling matters. And why? Because the things that we were doing in the past is not something that's going to be done now. It has to be changed. Like, for example, the use now of cashless transactions. Much as you want to do that, people will have to learn how to do cashless transactions, or how to do house cleaning, how to do service, etc. And these are things that may impact also on the service that is given to our tourists. How can rural tourism development be maximized in a competitive and sustainable manner? I guess domestic tourism is something that will start off. You have to actually build the confidence of the tourists, and the one way of doing that is making sure that they sample what you have here in the Philippines. And I think what we need to do also is, I was just talking to Jojo earlier. I said maybe COVID had a silver lining, because the environment is actually the biggest winner here. We've taken stock of how we are able to protect the environment. People have that traveled, and people now are seeing sights and sounds that they never had before when things were bustling. The issues of the past, lessons learned, like for example, the carrying capacity of certain destinations, the how we protect environment. Now that domestic tourism is going to be on the limelight, we've got to make sure that enterprises and tourism professionals actually get to protect also the environment. Otherwise, we will go back to the old cycle where challenges were going to be happening. New products, like the more open an environment is, the better. And so you're looking at destinations where there are no roof, no walls that will make COVID such a challenge for people to go out. We've got to also accept technology right now, because technology is going to permeate various operational aspects of the tourism industry, from the way that we market, the way that we accept reservations, the way that the contact tracing. Just the other day, I went to one of the malls here. Just before I entered, I had to do my contact tracing using a QR code. But before I entered another store within the mall, I had to also do a QR contact tracing. I said, why does it have to take several contact tracing marks for me to actually enter one mall that had different shops? So maybe there's a way that we can centralize contact tracing so that you don't go and, burden people just because if I'm going to do contact tracing several times in a destination, it's going to be a big turnoff for people like that. So I guess tourism professionals will make this particular industry very engaging. They say that the Filipinos are the preferred tourism professional, not only here in the Philippines, but also abroad. And so what we'd like to do is make sure that they have the training, they have the skills that are necessary to allow them not just to provide service here in the Philippines, but also outside when tourism restarts again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tina Aquino. Yes, we completely agree that there are so many things that need to change, and there are so many things that we all need to relearn to do. Okay, let's hear now from Mr. Jerry Cabalse. Sir.
Hello. Okay. First, I would like to thank the Department of Tourism for inviting us for this discussion. And also, good afternoon to our presenters and fellow reactors, and also to our participants, viewers. Okay, so I would like to start with the presentation of Sir Boboy Costas. He mentioned that migration has something to do with rural tourism. In my personal experience as a local tour operator in the small province of Batanes, we experienced this. Because of local tourism development or the community-based tourism, the people or the local Ivatans decided to stay in the island to work and even do tourism-related business. Before, people were asking, why is it that your province stay as 16,000 population? Are you not growing? And maybe one of the reasons is people migrate to look for a job, for income, and they go to Metro Manila, most of them. So because of rural tourism, a lot of the Ivatans stayed in the island and do both work and business. And even those who are already staying outside the province decided to go back to the island to do business. And now, because of COVID, people again return to their communities because that's the place where they feel safer. And now, the Department of Tourism conducted a lot of trainings to continuously empower the local communities. And I see that sustainable community-based tourism will really bring the income directly to the locals. And we can faster recover with this pandemic if we will follow, implement, and consistently all the protocols that has been set by the government. Recently, we joined the Tourism Promotions Board in their trip the validation trip in Baguio, Benguet, Mountain Province, and then the last trip was in Samar and Leyte. We observed that the communities were, yes, they're excited to restart tourism. They're very excited, and we see them prepared. But it is also important that the local government is also prepared to implement these protocols. I would like to commend especially the city of Tacloban, because when we were there, and maybe the whole of Eastern Visayas, we experienced this very strict and consistent implementation of the protocol. as a tourist, I can say that if this will be continuously implemented, our tourism industry will really recover faster. And maybe this pandemic, as what Ma'am Tina also mentioned, that the environment is one of the winners because of this pandemic. And now, because of implementation of the protocols, carrying capacities can now be observed in the communities. We can already push for the high value and low volume tourism in our communities. So that's what I can say with the presentation of Sir Costas. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Jerry. Lastly, can we hear from Dean Jesus Granado of the University of Santo Tomas?
Good afternoon, everyone. So, on the academic side, on the perspective of the universities offering tourism programs, especially Bachelor of Science in Tourism Management, I'm so happy to hear our 4 presenters because as what Ma'am Tina said, you gave us good news. For sure, if our students or fresh graduates heard you, I'm so sure that they're very excited that there's hope. Actually, that's, well, on part of the academe, that's our major concern. Because students would be asking, after our graduation, what would happen to us? Well, blessing in disguise perhaps of the K-12 implementation, we don't have so many graduates yet. But after this year, we're going to graduate our first batch. And what we're trying to look into in part of the academy, especially for the tourism restart, what we can offer upon hearing the 4 speakers, upon hearing the 4 presenters, because we're part of the academy, we can offer research. We'd like to offer our research expertise. So what are we going to do next? Beyond 2020, then perhaps our tourism research classes can also be a good part. That's why, just to share with you, with the University of Santo Tomas, I think 3 weeks ago, I suppose, we invited our stakeholders just to simply ask them, what are the things that could be, ano ang pwedeng mabigay ng academe, as universities, as colleges, schools offering BS Tourism Management, what can we do to restart tourism? So these are the things that we can offer. All the universities are very much eager to collaborate with all the stakeholders. And in terms of the domestic tourism or rural tourism, I'm looking into again, we're excited. We're excited because I think some of the tour operators who are with us today would agree that student market is very strong for domestic tourism because we bring our students to different rural destinations, especially for universities in Manila. We normally bring our students to Batanes. We normally bring our students to all rural destinations. That's why we're very excited. We really hope that we could travel again. Another thing is that another impact that we're looking into, especially on the academic side, especially for the things that were shared by our presenters, of course, I'm looking in the possibility or perhaps very high probability that our curriculum will be modified or something will be added to our curriculum because we need risk management. Of course, we already have sustainable tourism courses. We have even community-based tourism courses. We have these courses which would lead our would-be tourism managers, tourism planners to look into rural tourism. But again, because of this pandemic, I think what we're learning that we need to train our would-be tourism managers to really become aware because we have so many learnings. We have so many learnings of this pandemic, and these learnings would tell us that tama pa ba ang mga tinuturo namin sa aming mga estudyante? We've been teaching our students online. So most of the universities are ending their term or semester this December. And it's so good, again, for research to know that did we teach them, especially with tourism courses. That's why another interesting to note is that, and I think I would like also to update the other tourism stakeholders. I was surprised, well, I don't know if this will be applicable to other universities and colleges. I checked with our Office for Admissions. I was surprised there are still so many grade 12 would-be graduates who are interested to take up BS Tourism. Nagulat ako. Sabi ko, may pandemic and all, and yet they're still interested. That's why, may I repeat, the presenters gave us a good news in the academy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Granado. Actually, yes, when we understand, we can see that there is still a very big interest in tourism, and it's very exciting, especially for the tourism industry and all of the stakeholders. Before we officially end the seminar, may we request for all the presenters to give us your last few words, to give us your insight as well into what our reactors have spoken about. Thank you. Okay, can we hear first from Undersecretary Benito Bangzon, please?
Well, thank you. As we draw the year to a close, let me just take this opportunity to thank all our partners, both from government and the private sector in the Philippines and abroad, for sticking it out. I think, as Jojo mentioned earlier, this pandemic has really forced all of us to work even more closely. And let's look forward to a better, a brighter 2021, and let's continue to have that very strong and steady relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek Bong. May we hear now from Dr. Mario Hardy of PATA?
Thank you, everyone. It's been a very insightful conference. I'm really pleased that I actually joined today. I've learned so much from each of the speakers and the panelists before, so I really appreciate the invitation to join today. It's been an incredible year for learning, for me, for my team, for everyone here at PATA, of learning new skill sets, learning about more details about the challenges that each destinations are facing. So once again, thank you for inviting me to join this event today. I do believe that the future will be brighter. The travel will restart again. Let's stay positive, but it will be a slow and gradual restart. But also that gives us an opportunity, as Joselito mentioned before, and others, to restart better and have a stronger and more resilient tourism industry for the future. So on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. Yes, we will still continue to think positive. May we next hear the last words of Attorney Asido?
So thank you again for the invitation that you've extended to us this afternoon. And I would just like to echo that there really is light at the end of this very long tunnel. But may we not forget what we have learned so far, and the realizations as well will continue to guide us in the next few months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May we hear from Mr. Costas?
Yes, again, thank you very much, DOT, for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and my perspective from my experiences under the pandemic. What can I say? I think all our reactors and our panelists have said. So what I would like to leave with you is just keep the faith. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to all our presenters and to our reactors. To our reactors, Mr. Jojo Clemente, Ms. Tina Aquino, Sir Jerry, and Sir Jelis here on set with me. Of course, to our presenters, Undersecretary Bangzon, Mr. Boboy Costas, Attorney Guillermo Asido, Dr. Mario Hardy, for a very substantive discussion between all of the tourism industries present today. For more questions from our audience, you may direct your questions to ird@tourism.gov.ph. And thank you, everyone. It has been an honor moderating today's seminar.
Such an insightful and interesting discussion on the tourism industry's path to recovery and on the opportunities made available through the efforts of the DOT and its industry partners. Thank you very much for our dear experts for their time and effort in joining us this afternoon. But before we conclude this afternoon's program, to formally conclude a productive session, please welcome for his closing remarks the OIC Director of the Office of Tourism Development Planning, Research and Information Management, Mr. Warner M. Andrada.
To our dear resource speaker and panelists, our competent reactors who are representative of the various backgrounds for the tourism industry, to all tourism stakeholders who joined us this afternoon's seminar, a warm greetings to all. As we conclude this seminar on tourism and rural development, we are hopeful that the Department of Tourism was able to convey information and ideas that are not only timely, but also of significance to the efforts being rolled out by the entire sector in its drive towards recovery. As we are about to close this year, 2020, we have come across some of the most challenging times, not only for tourism, but for our modern society. The unprecedented circumstances brought about by the COVID-19 health emergency has left many of us struggling to cope with the adverse impacts of the pandemic. It is with this thought that we, the department, continue to pursue activities like today's seminar that will not only inform but also help in managing our plans through the introduction of development alternatives and keeping all of us in the know with the latest trend and industry direction. In this seminar, the iteration of the role of tourism as means to develop our rural areas through a responsible and environmentally sound principle, we must also look into the people whose lives are touched by tourism and whose futures depend on the industry's sustainability and competitiveness amidst the challenges present at this point of time. It is because of the Filipinos and all peoples of the world who rely on tourism as beacon of hope for overcoming poverty and building a better life. Therefrom that we must remain steadfast in our commitment to the advancement of this agenda. The dawn of another year is rising over more closely in the horizon, and we are confident that together we can make 2021 a successful and eventful year for tourism, its stakeholders, for rural development, and an overall holistic development moving forward. With this role, I thank you all for joining us in this afternoon seminar. Please keep safe and healthy, a merry holiday season, and hopefully we will be seeing each others in person very soon, all while experiencing why it's more fun in the Philippines. Mabuhay and God bless us all.
Thank you very much, Director Warner Andrada. We're indeed very grateful for all our speakers, panelists, moderator, and to everyone who joined us today here in Zoom and on Facebook Live. Kind reminder to our participants, please accomplish the post-event survey at the end of the webinar to receive your certificate. So that's it for today's webinar. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. Stay safe, safe travel Pinas, and do have more fun in the Philippines.